Welcome back to Smoked BBQ Source. I'm Ricer, and one of my favorite things to do when the weather starts getting a little bit colder, I like to smoke up a few batches of venison snack sticks. What do you expect? It's deer hunting season. Smoking cured meats can be a little intimidating for most people, but once you've done it, I promise you're gonna be doing it again. And most likely, slowly buying better equipment. I started off with an old hand crank and a prehistoric stuffer. And the funny thing is, both of these model numbers are WORK. Work. Today, I'm doing up a 15-pound batch. I have 9 pounds of very lean venison, 5 pounds of pork butt, and about 1 pound of beef scrap that I trimmed off a prime rib this week. The venison and the pork butt I coarse ground a couple weeks ago and put it in the freezer. 2 days prior to starting this cook, I threw it in the refrigerator so it could start to thaw out. I try to keep my meat to fat ratio right around an 85 to 15. This one, it probably is just a slight less, but I don't mind. I'm actually looking for a drier stick. In my opinion, you should never go over an 80-20 mixture because it gets a little greasy. Most of the time when I smoke up some venison snack sticks, I just get a box kit from PS Seasoning. They have everything that you need in this kit, and it will do up to a 25-pound batch. And they also sell just the cure and other spices separately. The one big thing about using a kit is that you don't really have to do a lot of math. You just gotta make sure that you're doing 25 pounds. And seeing that I'm only doing 15 pounds today, there is going to be a little bit of math involved, but it's not like accelerated algebra back in high school. Here's a pro tip: when it comes to making sausage from scratch, get yourself a good scale. But when you buy one, make sure that it actually can read in the 0.0 grams. Making sausage, you want to use grams because it's a lot more accurate than teaspoons, cups, or glug-glugs. For this 15 pounds of venison snack sticks, I took the pink cure package that has 27 grams in it, divided it by 5, then times it by 3 to get a total of 16.2 grams of pink cure needed for this batch. And I did the same thing with the original snack stick seasoning. We have 666 grams, times it by 5, divided by 3 to give me a total of 399.6 grams. Now it is a great time to get that meat out of the fridge and start seasoning it up. One thing about making sausage, you want to make sure that your meat and your grinder are nice and cold. And it's roughly about 60 degrees in this studio. And don't worry if your meat is still a little frozen, just go ahead and break it up a little bit. This little bit of beef trimmings, it really isn't going to matter if it's only going to go through that grinder on one pass. The rest of it was coarse ground at a 1/2 inch. I like to get my hands in there and start mixing up that venison and pork so it starts to blend out a tad. Typically, whenever I'm using any type of cure, I do prefer to put it in some water during the mixing process. But this time, I just spread it evenly across the top of this meat and start mixing it up with my hands. But moving forward, I'm not gonna do it this way again. I just simply forgot. One of those things that happens sometimes when you're filming. You jump ahead of a step. When it comes to the seasoning though, I always add it to the meat before I start grinding it, or if like in this situation, I pre-ground some of it, then I add it before that last pass. And before I start the last grind, I actually hand mix it some more, taking the bottom and working it up to the top. And on this batch, I'm actually going to use a 1/4 inch plate on that grinder. Normally I use a 3/16 inch plate on any type of smoked and cured sausage. As far as the finished product, I really don't think that mattered much. Before I start up the grinder, I always like to drop a little bit of fat right down the throat. This just helps keep a little bit of wear and tear off from that grinder. I really like this dark red color from the seasoning and the venison in this grind. And you can see it looks pretty dang consistent. Now our next step is to mix it up even better. I have a nice mixer that hooks right onto my grinder. If you don't have that, you can use a KitchenAid blender, or again, just use your hands. To help break down the proteins in this meat, we're gonna add some water. You wanna use 1 ounce per pound, so on this batch, I've got 15 ounces of cold water. And again, normally this is when I add my cure to this mixture. You're going to need to mix this for at least 5 minutes, but it kind of depends on the size of the batch. We need to get that protein extraction started, a good sign that it's ready to be stuffed. I always grab a clump, and if it doesn't stick to the bottom of my hand, I go ahead and start mixing it up a little bit longer. best way I've always known that it is ready, it's gonna stick to the bottom of my hand. I used my electric stuffer on these, but here is a pro tip. And unfortunately, I learned this the hard way. You always want to make sure you have one piston gasket on hand. Because mine, it finally had a blowout from all the use on this electric stuffer in the past couple years. So basically, it just lost pressure and I really couldn't fill up that casing nice and tight. I knew when I was doing it this way, I would run into a little bit of presentation issues because of all the air gaps in between the meat and the casing. But for the most part, they turned out okay. I used my little sausage prick, but I knew it wasn't gonna really help to get all of that air out of these collagen casings. Eventually, we did get it all stuffed, but we had to open that canister back up 4 times. I shouldn't have been so Norwegian and just went ahead and grabbed my other stuffer and hand cranked it out. I use this pan to measure the length of my snack sticks so they fit in my Pro Max 100. This pan, it also fits in my refrigerator, and because I didn't use any cure accelerator, I need to cure these for at least 24 hours before I start putting them in the smoker. This gives the seasoning a little longer to enhance the flavor, plus it also helps you get a jump start on the drying process of those casings. Preheat your smoker to 100 degrees or turn it to the lowest setting. We want to dry out these sticks nice and slowly. When it comes to loading up my Pro Max, I just use these rod hangers and take that big old stick and wrap it right over the top. I typically put 5 or 6 strands on each rod and then hang them carefully in the back. You really gotta watch out for this because they are kind of easy to break off. That typically happens when I'm actually testing the temps on the sticks. They obviously get a little weaker at that bend point, so then if they do break, I just take them and put them on top of the hangers until they've finished. You can go ahead and take a piece of string and tie one end off and then hang it that way, but being that I only have a couple every once in a while break, I just do it this way because it saves me a lot of time. After 1 hour of the drying process, I turn my Pro Max 100 up to 155 degrees because we're gonna get some smoke on these sticks. This pit runs off from sawdust, and I'm using hickory because I love the smoky flavor that it adds to these snack sticks. You'll see the smoke roll for around 3 hours on a full pan of sawdust, but it does depend a little bit on how damp your sawdust is. But you'll smell that hickory in the air forever, even when you're down to just some black ash. I am always very satisfied with the amount of smoke flavor that I get off in this pit, plus it runs very efficient. Once my pit is all done producing any smoke, or around the 5-hour mark, I crank it up to 170 degrees to finish these sticks off. A snack stick is actually done once it's reached an internal temperature of 155 degrees. And the total cook time on a Pro Smoker Pro Max typically is around 8 to 10 hours. It really just depends on how big of a batch you're doing. I cook snack sticks 2 different ways. The first one is your typical doneness at 155 degrees with a more tender type of bite. The second is a little bit more dried out version that kind of reminds me of a ground up jerky. On this batch, I actually decided to do it more on the drier style. So I turned my pit down to 155 degrees just to dry out these a tad more. This step, it took around another 4 hours, so I have a total cook time of 12 hours. Then I take them and throw them in an ice bath for about 5 minutes to stop the cooking process. This actually helps them cool down so you can eat them or start cutting them into the individual sticks. I usually cut them right around that 6-inch mark because they fit good in the bags that I use in my chamber vac. Before I actually start sealing all these sticks up, I put them back in the fridge uncovered so those casings start to bloom a little bit. The yellowish color on the outside of these casings is because I wasn't able to get them packed as tight, and that's a little bit of grease that's sticking to the inside of the casing. They still look pretty dang good, and they have a really good snap and a ton of flavor. This is just part of the game. When a piece of equipment fails, you kind of have to improvise or just deal with it, but if you can still get a good product at the end, it makes you want to do it again. I mean, it really does. I'm just gonna chalk this one up to a lesson learned. Don't be so stubborn. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I have 3 stuffers. I just enjoy buying meat processing equipment. Sorry. I did pull out one stick at the 155-degree doneness to show you the texture difference between the 2 different styles that I do. The one on your right is your standard 155 internal temperature degrees snack stick, and the one on the left has that extra 4 hours of dry time. Probably the biggest reason why my friends and I like this style a lot is because it goes even better with beer. Here on Smoked BBQ Source, we do plan to do a lot more meat processing type of video content, so it's probably a great time for you to subscribe to the channel. We'll have links in the description below with a lot of the things that you've seen in this video and a more in-depth review on how to make venison snack sticks. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.